Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you, as always. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're starting off our show with a Gaza update, which really does hammer home that everyone trying to soft sell what Israel is doing, trying to say, oh, we're trying to keep them under control from both the kind of Jewish, Israeli, kind of liberal Zionist forces to some of this very same people, including our government here in the U.S., are absolutely, completely, and utterly lying to you, feeding you a big pile of crap after another. I'll give you all the details on Benjamin Netanyahu's post-war plan, as well as a really just awful to listen to, but, you know, we're going to listen to it anyway. Quote from another one of these just Pentagon spoke schools, including as well new evidence emerging of Israel killing its own civilians. Another example of this, the electronic intifada, of course, has found since October 7th, and this refers to something that happened on October 7th. But we also have a non-Israel Gaza story for you today, and that is to do with Donald Trump and the abortion/IVF situation. He had a very, very interesting reaction to it, and of course we will end with a report from Gaza from Bashir Mumar about why he is continuing to tell his story in the midst of the genocide. All right, so we start off today with the latest on the continuing genocide on Gaza, with Benjamin Netanyahu unveiling his post-war plan. And it really is kind of interesting to, you know, hear all the different things that we've heard from, you know, both the kind of liberal Zionists and, you know, the bring our hostages home crowd. You know, we only just care about the hostages. We just really want to, you know, come in and deal with that. We are not really interested in a broader war of ethnic cleansing. You know, that's not something that Israel's really interested in the longer term. We've heard that from the liberal Zionists, both here in the U.S. and in Israel. And we've also heard that from our government, that they're going to step in and try to stop anything like this. But Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he just unveiled his post-war plan for Gaza for the first time since the start of the war. The short-term objectives of the plan is to fully dismantle Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and secure the release of all Israeli captives, following by a full demilitarization of Gaza, over which Israel would play a role in governing civilian affairs, similar to the way it currently controls the West Bank. So, yeah, it is just completely, you know, releasing a plan that flies in the face of all the different things that the United States has said. You know, we will not accept any kind of Israeli control over Gaza. We don't want to see even a reduction in Gaza's territory. That has been the line from the United States. But here, you know, Benjamin Netanyahu is coming out and saying, yeah, we're going to control the thing. We're going to govern it. Like, we're just going to make it a new kind of West Bank type of situation with just kind of constant ethnic tension. And you can bet your bottom dollar a continuous inflow of, you know, Zionist settlers in the region. And that is, you know, really, really, I think the plan that we can kind of expect to have happen, because if you look at everything else that's taken place throughout the war so far, do you really think the United States is going to come in and stop this from happening? Like, is going to be the bridge too far? And we'll get to how they're talking about even the Rafah invasion, which is supposedly so awful in a second. But, you know, this really just shows you, this is just an absolutely, you know, this is the plan. This is what we are looking towards in the future. You know, kind of Gaza turning into this new West Bank, no civilian control, completely destroyed cities, and the displaced Gazans just move to, you know, slums, move to current tent cities, the same way it is in the West Bank. You know, and hopefully, you know, praying, fingers crossed, you know, if you're the Israeli government, that they're going to, you know, just essentially fuck off to Egypt or Europe or America or Jordan or just wherever, so that they can come in and build their houses. According to Haaretz, the Prime Minister's plan would see the day-to-day civil affairs of the enclave administered by local officials and professionals with managerial experience who must not be identified with states or organizations that support terror and must not receive salaries from them. And, you know, by the way, that includes, in the eyes of Israel, the UN. So, yeah, they say they should be dismantled in retaliation for the alleged role 13 of 13,000 of its Gaza employees played in the October 7th attacks. And by the way, Israel has provided no evidence for this, just pulling it up out of whole cloth. But I think the important thing about this story, and Netanyahu saying this, because by the way, it will not be covered in any mainstream media, liberal or conservative, in the United States, or for that matter, anywhere else in the Western world. You will not hear any kind of condemnations of this, and it will be because our government is planning on letting it happen, but dragging its feet all the while, just saying, we are really concerned. This is the same bullshit statements that we've heard from the jump on this. We are really concerned. We want to see, you want to see them really give it their best effort to protecting civilians, but if they fall short, that's not okay, or that's not a big deal. We're not going to really get too mad at them. Is essentially what's going on here. Unsurprisingly, Netanyahu's plan has come under fire from both Hamas and the PA, but that really is again no surprise. Gaza will only be part of the Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital, and any other plans are doomed to failure, said, this is a PA quote there. So again, really, really intimidating when it comes from the PA, who is currently helping Israel maintain their control of the West Bank by breaking up any sort of authentic Palestinian resistance, which is really, really remarkable. But again, the main thing to drive home from this is just really broadly how full of really shit that it's important to say it like that, that everyone is on this, just acting like, we're going to come to sort of peaceful solution, we're going to work towards a two-state solution. They don't care about that. They're just making noises in the press to calm people down and to pull the wool over people's eyes. All the while, this is the plan: turning Gaza into Israel, essentially. That is the plan. Turning Gaza into the West Bank. That is the plan, and that is the important thing to have, I think, for if you're kind of a pro-Palestinian person with a soul, to have it in the back of your mind and say, this is really what they are doing here. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have launched a series of attacks into central Gaza, killing at least 40 Palestinians and injuring at least 100 more in an ongoing massacre. It was around 6:30 a.m. when the Israeli soldiers blew up a wall in our house, then opened fire randomly at us, said Ramadan Shamakla, a 21-year-old survivor from the Zaytun neighborhood of Gaza City. The soldiers brutally attacked me and my brother, who's been suffering from a foot injury since the 2014 war, and beat us extensively. He continued describing a scene in which Israeli soldiers shouted obscene words at his family and forced the women to remove their hijabs. Continuing, by the way, besieging of a hospital, continuing attacks on, the dead. I never thought this would happen in a hospital, said Dr. Sarah Al-Saka, Gaza's first female surgeon and one of a small handful of medical staff currently attending the patients in the besieged hospital. I never thought I would be bringing patients from a tertiary hospital to a field hospital, she continued, but it's happening. It's not safe for them to stay there. They don't have the quality of medical care they deserve and they need, so that's why we keep on going. Just absolutely unimaginable bravery, unimaginable heroism in the face of just incredibly brutal and evil conditions. Meanwhile, several Israeli human rights organizations called B'Tselem, Physicians for Human Rights, and Breaking the Silence have called on the countries who withdrew funding for UNRWA to reinstate funding. Again, it's just absolutely just disgusting that they have provided this, and the United States, for all their supposed care, their just waves of BS that they throw on people every single day about how, we care about the civilians, Again, there has been no evidence provided. We have seen the dossier that has been given to people about this. It's one page of nothing. It's just these guys, based on, these guys participated in the massacre, and we know because of, supposed phone records that show they were in the Israeli side of the Gaza fence on October 7th. That is the only, and do they show those phone records? No, they don't. And this is 13 people, and this is used, again, and the U.S. is actively helping in this to chip away at the existence of a unified, coherent Gaza society. And it is just absolutely horrific. Doctors Without Borders has condemned Israel's war without limits, joining calls for a ceasefire as a team of UN experts for countries who ship arms to Israel to stop, called for countries who ship arms to Israel to stop immediately, as they will likely be used in human rights violations, as we've seen in the horrific, probably one of the most horrific, I guess, it's probably too many horrific crimes to count, but the murder of Hin Rajab with American tank shells, with American bombs, who is, of course, the 6-year-old girl who had called for hours and was trapped in a van trying to flee with her dead family members. She was the only one alive, crouched under the seats of the car, desperately trying to call the Palestinian Red Crescent Service to come and rescue her. Not only did they then blow up the people who tried to rescue her in just an absolutely decimated and destroyed ambulance, but they then, she probably had been dead for days before they were able to come out there due to the storm of bullets and missiles they had to dodge to come get her. But of course, they eventually found Hinderjob dead. One of the most absolutely tragic and horrific stories that call of her on the phone. Anytime I think about it, it just sends a chill down your spine. It is just absolutely horrific. Meanwhile, Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has announced 3,000 more housing units will be greenlit in the Male Adumim settlement in West Bank as an appropriate Zionist response to a deadly shooting on Thursday where 3 Palestinian gunmen opened fire near a Israeli checkpoint, killing a total of 1 Israeli citizen. May every terrorist planning to harm us know that lifting a finger against Israeli citizens will be met with a death blow and destruction, in addition to the deepening of our eternal grip on the land of Israel. It's just a vice grip around another group of people. And again, why these sporadic displays of resistance, why people really need to feel essentially the impulse to commit suicide, essentially, by driving a car into one of these checkpoints or something like that, is because, they are resisting, and it's because Israel is doing these settlements, and because this will always continue to happen as long as this settlement expansion, this illegal settlement expansion, will continue to take place. I think Biden put something out today about the Israeli settlements, saying some sort of incredibly weak condemnation that is really almost too he restored a legal finding dating back 50 years that Israeli settlements are illegal, are illegitimate under international law, not even illegal. So it is, pretty telling there. They won't even use the word illegal. They won't even take any stronger action under international law. They won't join one of the many current court cases against Israel, including the one that was going on this week about of course, they took Israel's side in the court case about the legality of the occupation. But now they're doing this, essentially glorified press release to change a precedent that Trump changed to make it even more pro-Israel, that, hey, these settlements, they're probably not in line with international law. Are we going to do anything to stop you from expanding them? No, we're not. Have at it, have fun, is essentially what they're saying here. Meanwhile, Israeli military raids across the West Bank continue, and with Israeli forces detaining 8 Palestinian between Bethlehem and Tulkarem last night, arresting 2 children in the town of Sinjar, north of Ramallah, as the 10th Palestinian prisoner had died in Israeli custody since the crackdown of Palestinian prisoners following October 7th. Meanwhile, we have, the United States just continuing to, almost be annoyed. You get the sense of annoyance that these spokespeople are coming out here and forced to, put on this air of concern, say, oh, of course we're concerned. Of course we want to keep an eye on Israel and what they're doing. But it's always beneath this kind of air of concern. You see there's just hidden contempt. They're being asked any questions about this in the first place. One example of this is this exchange today at the Pentagon.
Has the IDF provided any plans to DoD about for its plan to protect civilians ahead of any kind of ground invasion?
I'm not aware of any plan fully presented to the United States to review. Again, we're not asking to check their homework. What we're asking them to do is put forward a credible plan that they will be able to, as we have said in many conversations, protect the over 1 million innocent Palestinians that are...
Again, it's like you don't care about that. You cannot do this with any more contempt. Like, we're not asking to check their homework. We're just asking... And again, she almost goes on to say the same thing that she's saying that she's not asking for. I'm not aware of any plan fully presented to the United States to review. Again, we're not asking to check their homework. But then, she goes into her, standard BS line after the mask of contempt is able to be, the mask slips, the contempt is shown, then she kind of puts the mask back up and says, oh yeah, but we do need a plan. Again, what's the difference between those two plans? We don't know. we do need a plan to protect the, over 1 million civilians living there. It's just absolutely, just clearly just contemptuous and clearly just insulting the intelligence of not just the reporters there, but any of these, people who are listening to this and are just like, what the heck? This is absolutely ridiculous. Of course, you're not going to go for any plan. Like, if you're not getting a plan, what are they going to do? Just put out a press release and, they'll take that as a word? Honestly, that's probably all they want, really. It's just some press release saying, okay, here's how we're going to protect civilians. This is why the United States shouldn't be worried. And then, again, this is what we've seen from jump. The United States line on this is just not that, oh, you're doing something wrong here, Israel. It's, oh, you are not giving us enough, BS to feed to our people so we can continue to support you. I think that's, kind of a very, very important distinction in the broader context, in the broader conduct of the United States and their handling of this whole situation since October 7th.
Are there, and of course, any credible plan would have to take into account food, medicine, services. How are you going to provide those as you move a population? I know that's something that they're working through. The secretary, of course, remains engaged with Minister Gallant, not just at his level, but levels here at this building and throughout the interagency. But I'm just not going to get ahead of any plans that Israel's working on right now.
He has not seen that plan yet.
No, we haven't seen the plan, but we're not also asking to grade homework here. We want to make sure that whatever plan that they
just what a contemptuous expression.
Do brief us on does include protecting innocent civilians in that.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, that would be nice if it does include protecting innocent civilians. But it's just like, again, they're not asking about a plan. They're not pushing for any rush. All they want is just more BS to feed to the idiots called, aka the American public, just to lie to them about the reality of the situation. All right. As we continue to see holes poked in the kind of Israeli October 7th narrative of just barbarous terrorists crossing the border, cutting women's breasts off and playing with them like hacky sack, we have seen yet another piece of evidence from the Israeli media this time. Israeli claims that, again, Hamas or other Palestinian fighters killed 12,000 Israelis on the 7th of October. But the Electronic Intifada has done really remarkable reporting on this, showing some of the orders and some of the instances, passed down really just as they were reported in Israeli media. They were just translated by the Electronic Intifada, that shows that there were some really, kind of aggressive attempts, orders to the, Israeli media, to the Israeli army on the day, to say just attack anything that moves. Don't care if they're just the terrorists or they're actually, Israeli civilians or Israeli citizens who may be caught up in the crossfire. Really no concern shown to that, which obviously raises question: how much of these civilians were killed by Hamas, and how much of these civilians were killed by an overzealous, to say the least, Israeli response. So here we have, again, just the continuing reporting by Israel. So this is another incident revealed by Haaretz and translated by the Electronic Intifada. It's something that's really, again, rarely repeated anywhere else in any kind of English language outlet. So Haaretz reported that an Israeli man escaped from the supernova rave where Israeli forces fired on civilians, as we pretty much know at this point, because, again, it was reported in Israeli media. You have this TV interview of the day where a fighter pilot essentially admits it, as the translation from the Electronic Intifada shows. Where Israeli forces fired on civilians only to be fatally shot when he reached what he thought he would be the safety of the kibbutz Alumim, a nearby colonial settlement. So this guy, trying to get out of the supernova rave, goes to the kibbutz, thinks he'll be safe, and then he is shot. We'll tell that story here. So Ofek Atun and his girlfriend Tamar fled the Nova outdoor rave by car as rockets started flying overhead. The couple drove north until security personnel from a nearby community directed them into kibbutz Alumim. At the kibbutz, the couple frantically banged on doors before storming into the home of an elderly couple who were taking shelter inside their safe room. Thinking the terrorists had just broken into the homeowners called the kibbutz's volunteer security squad for help. as Ofek and Tamar were hiding inside the house, the security squad arrived, accompanied by a kibbutz resident soldier, so pretty much, I guess, the IDF's man in that area, and discreetly evacuated the elderly couple through the safe room window. The account states the soldier then entered the house through the window with a pistol in hand, while a security squad member provided cover through the window. According to a member of the security squad, Atun and the soldier then got into a fight, and the soldier shot Atun many times, mistaking him for a terrorist. According to Tamar, Ofek was shot dead without any prior struggle. Tamar was herself then shot in the stomach by Israeli soldiers, but lived to tell the tale. So again, it's almost kind of understandable to see how this confusion could have happened, and with what we know are some pretty poorly trained soldiers who are responding in the heat of a moment to a crisis that they never really imagined. But the fact remains is this is yet another instance of dead Israelis on October 7th being killed by other Israelis. And the question is, would this story have come out had she been killed, or would there have been another attempt to cover up, similar to the failed effort to hide how Israeli forces shelled a home, killing a number of Israeli civilians in Kibbutz Be'eri? In December, the Israeli military admitted to an intense and complex quantity of friendly fire incidents on the 7th of October, but is refusing to investigate them, claiming that to do so would not be, quote, morally sound. And, that's quite an interesting logic. I'll just say that. All right. To our next story now. Donald Trump on Friday said that he would strongly support the availability of IVF and called on lawmakers in Alabama to preserve access to the treatment that has become a new flashpoint in the 2024 presidential election here. This is from the AP. It was his first comment since an Alabama Supreme Court ruling that had left some providers in the state, caused some providers in the state to suspend their in vitro fertilization programs and left some Republicans divided over the issue. Because again, this is, we've seen this many, many times, the fact that the far right of the Republican Party is essentially run by literal freakazoids, people who just cannot, under normal circumstances, assimilate into normal American society. Like if somebody who, kind of grows up through, and this is honestly, when you really break down to it, it's not that many people, but there are so many of these conservative institutions, whether it be kind of conservative universities funded by, big donors like Hillsdale College, for example, and whether it be these legal places like the Federalist Society and all these other societies where, or in these kind of conservative media places where they're just not really read by a lot of people, but again, are completely, perfectly, and totally funded, and well-funded at that, by, again, big billionaires. And that really creates a bubble of, what we're thinking is popular, what we're thinking has a broader base, and, they don't realize there are very much in, and especially these, I'm talking about some of the real kind of cultural conservative type people, are in a pretty extreme bubble. This is kind of the Christian conservatives get, a little bit factored into this. You get, again, the conservative legal society, a lot of these kind of smaller conservative media outlets, even a place like the Daily Wire, that is not a place that's overwhelmingly funded on viewer contributions. It's a place that's it's funded by, Mount Walsh, the person who pays Mount Walsh's salary, pays a lot of other people's salaries because he's probably a billionaire, and that leads to a bit of ideological disconnection from just normal people. And that includes normal conservatives. Because if you talk to even some, bunch of people in Alabama who would really, shun anyone who got an abortion, hate gay people, whatever, and they go on one of their favorite conservative media sites and listen to, a 34-year-old, millennial out of Hillsdale College who writes for the Federalist or something, which is, if you don't know, kind of a small kind of conservative media outlet that's funded by, billionaires in the way I was referring to earlier. They'd be like, who the hell is this person? And get them away from me and my kids. It is this level of just lack of touch, lack of just real connection on even on a social level. There's a good chance these kids were growing up, they were ostracized, roller backpack type kids, throughout high school and middle school or whatever. And they're just, really just built different in a pretty, lifelong and pretty bone deep way. And I feel like that is really what is driving a lot of these people. And there's not just younger people. It's not just there's people like, if you read the judge who made this decision, he's like 56-year-old man, but essentially argues for essentially a Christian theocracy. He's just like, we were all made in God's image, and the laws should reflect that, and that means we have to stop IVF treatment. It's just like, it really, people taking it to that. There are some people who would say, oh, it is true that we should have kind of a theocratic state where the laws reflect religion in principle. But when it comes to the actual rubber hitting the road of, oh, wait, stopping IVF treatment, it's like, oh, I know a friend who goes through IVF treatment. They're good people. I'm not going to mess with their life. I'm not going to mess with their ability to have children. So, people advocating for this just come off as completely weird. And one person who does get that is Donald Trump. He said in his Truth Social network, in a post, under my leadership, Republican Party will always support the creation of strong, thriving, healthy American families. We want to make it easier for mothers, fathers to have babies, not harder. Which, again, is the real, sensible pro-life argument. We don't want abortions, so we want people to have kids by any means necessary. And that is, infinitely more normal argument, which shows that, you may not like him, but the reason why Donald Trump is the threat that he is because he is not this type of freakazoid type person. He understands, he's been out and about, a little bit more in terms of, places that are not as deeply and insanely conservative as, for example, the judge in Alabama who wrote this ruling, and knows that if you say that to normal people, and, also especially in the context of Dobbs being overturned, and the just general weird attitude with regards to, critical race theory, the transgender panic, all that stuff, a lot of people just thought that was incredibly weird, and the 2022 midterm elections show that. Now, to take it up another notch with IVF cancellation and banning IVF is just like, a whole nother level of just politically insane. So Trump sees this. So the all-Republican Alabama Supreme Court, among the nation's most conservative judicial panels, ruled that frozen embryos can be considered children under state law. Since then, the Alabama clinics and hospitals, including the University of Alabama at Birmingham Health System, have announced pauses on IVF services. A pretty serious and pretty really major step when it comes to the expanding of pro-life legal theory, I guess you could call that. But it is something that Republicans under Trump will probably really seek to run away from, because they know, like everyone else, that it is absolutely insane. And if you start to advocate for it in public, whether even in a dinner party, whether it be a dinner party, whether it be a fundraiser, whether it be even especially on the campaign trail, you will sound like an absolute freakazoid, and you will lose any election that you stand in. I may even lose an Alabama election, like at that rate, because it is just disconnected from reality and from people's lives. But that obviously, important to say that does not mean it cannot stop a lot of really, really bad things from happening, a lot of suffering from being caused, and a lot of damage from being done. So that is important to clarify. All right. Do want to end today's show on a report from the Electronic Intifada. This is from Bashir Mumar sharing the story of his cousin Mustafa Ali Hamed Mumar. So Mustafa is the director of the Jusur Amal Association for Special Education. In 2006, he was arrested from his family's home in Gaza along with two brothers on charges of belonging to a resistance group. His brothers were released, but he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. This is his story in his words. In the crisp April air of 2016, I emerged from a decades-long imprisonment hopeful of a fresh start. For years, I clung to the promise of freedom, envisioning a future filled with the embrace of family life. I worked to establish myself, finally ending up with the Jusur Amal School for Special Education, working with and for children with disabilities. It was rewarding. With my dear wife, Arkan, we started a family with hope and love. I had a few years of taking my first steps into the world beyond Israeli prison walls. But one fateful night in October last year, the night sky erupted into a cacophony of chaos and destruction. Israeli warplanes, like dark angels of death, descended upon our neighborhood, reducing our homes to rubble and lives to mere shadows of their former selves. In the madness that ensued, I found myself fleeing for the safety of the European hospital in Khan Yunis, unable to reach my home. But there I was met with yet another onslaught of devastation. Everything has now been taken from me. Israeli missiles in their indiscriminate fury tore through the fabric of my existence, snatching away the lives of my beloved mother Naima, Arkan, and my innocent children, Batul, Ali, and Hani, who are, by the way, are 7, 5, and 2, respectively. Though I was spared from witnessing the horror firsthand, the weight of the loss bore down on me with crushing force. As I approached the hospital, my heart pounded with a mixture of dread and despair. The weight of what awaited me felt like an anchor dragging me down into an abyss of sorrow. With trembling hands and aching limbs, I pushed open the doors and stepped aside, steeling myself for the sight that would greet me. There they were, laid out before me in white bags. My knees buckled beneath me as I collapsed in front of them, the reality of their loss crashing over me like a tidal wave. Tears blurred my vision as I reached out, desperate to touch them one last time, but all I could feel were their cold, lifeless contours of the bags. There was my mother, who had waited so patiently for me to return. There was my wife, my rock in the storm of adversity, Arkan. The Arabic word for pillars was the strength that sustained me through the years of suffering. Now that pillar is gone, and with her all my dreams lie in ruins. There were my children, the light of my life, all in one bag, their identities reduced to fragments of clothing. My Ali, Batul, and Hani are just three of more than 12,000 children killed by the Israeli war machine in Gaza since the 7th of October. They became statistics in the devastating toll of Gaza's suffering. But the pain is no number. The pain for all those patients who lost their children is the same as overwhelming and unbearable. I, who rarely showed harshness, find myself haunted by the memory of their disfigured bodies rather than the lively, innocent children I once knew. The journey to bury them was a harrowing ordeal, with each step heavier than the last. A truck, laden with the bodies of my immediate family, along with 24 other relatives, became a somber procession of grief. 24 other relatives, just unimaginable, as we wade our way through the streets of Gaza. Bodies were stacked upon bodies. There was no space for dignity or solace. We bade farewell amid a chorus of wails and cries, our hearts breaking again and again with each passing moment. The pain was palpable, a raw wound that refused to heal. Yet, even in our darkest hour, there was no space to fully express our sorrow. In Gaza, grief is a luxury we cannot afford. There are tents to be built, mouths to feed, and wounds to tend to. As I stand amid the ruins of my shattered dreams, I realize that freedom alone cannot heal the wounds inflicted by war and injustice. I tell my story not for pity, but in defiance. We are not just casualties of conflict. We are human beings with hopes, dreams, and a fierce determination to rebuild amidst the rubble of our shattered lives. Gaza continues to suffer under the weight of oppression. My plea is for justice, for dignity, for the chance to rise from ashes and reclaim our humanity. We refuse to be silenced by the roar of bombs or the indifference of the world. We will endure, we will rebuild, and we will triumph. That is from Bashir Mumar and the story of his cousin, Mustafa Al-Hamed Mumar. We're back with another news flash next Monday.